Hi guys, I should be coming through now. Tomorrow's the big exam. Uh, I don't want this to be anything too serious in terms of what we actually look at. It's more a case of I think we should be focusing on any last minute Q&A type things. Anything you want me to clear up? If you have any questions about how we're going to do this, that's fine. You can start firing some questions. I've got a few slides I've got to show you, just in terms of stuff that I went over over the Easter break, in terms of how you should answer each question. But if you have anything specific, then just let me know. So just a reminder, I guess, of some of the basics that you should absolutely just be aware of. It's a 2-hour exam. 1 hour on question 2, half an hour on question 1A and 1B, 25 marks apiece for question 1A and 1B, and 50 marks for question 2. So hi, just nice to see some of you there. Hi Sean, nice to see you. Hello, hi, hello. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, fire away. Otherwise, like I said, I've got a few slides I want to show you, and we can move on from there. Dom, cramming time, very nice. I'm confused about question 1B narrative. That comes from Dylan. How to go about answering question 1B? Josh, hello Josh, 8135. Question 1B seems to be... Question 1B I've got a bit of an issue with, I'm not going to lie. Question 1B is only worth 25 marks and it requires a huge amount of revision for what is just a 25 marker. So for anyone who hasn't seen yet, I uploaded a video earlier, the lesson that we did in lesson where I kind of went through all of the theorists in a nutshell. But the thing to remember with question 1B, God, everyone's here saying question 1B, so yeah, that seems to be the issue. The thing to remember with question 1B is it isn't all about theory. You are going to get marks, you're going to get some of the top bands for using theory confidently, but ultimately what it's about is analysing your own piece of work as if it was a real media text, talking about it so confidently that you could very easily be talking about something you'd seen in the cinema. So that means justifying why you did things, confidently saying how you constructed narrative, for example. If it's audience, confidently saying what you did to target a specific audience. That's the kind of thing that you should be looking at, really. Let me go over to the slide. This is something I prepared during the half-term break when I did a revision session with my guys. Go. All right, guys, we should be back now. Sorry about that. I don't think my internet's good enough, so I'm back. It's slightly lower quality, but it should be good. Um, So yeah, that last page that I was just showing you there, that was what the examiner said. So realistically, they were basically just saying then that you need to be spending more time talking about your text than about the theorists. Now, a lot of people there are talking about question 1A. I don't really want to hazard a guess as to what question 1A could be. I've got a feeling question A is probably going to be creativity. I've got a feeling it's going to be creativity. Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. Having said that, I mean, what they showed us with the AS exam recently is they're not afraid to use the same thing 2 years in a row. So I mean, it could be media language. I really don't know. Okay, let's just have a look at some of the questions here. Yeah, sorry about the freeze, guys. Can you explain what theory you could add to the 1B theme of genre? Yep, anything to do with question 1B. I don't want to spend too long, Ellie Frampton. I don't want to spend too long kind of like on the different theorists because we could spend hours talking about those. What I'd recommend is, in this video, you should see the video that you're watching right now. In the top right-hand corner, there's a little I button that says From the Media Wizards. If you click on that, I actually made a video this afternoon that outlines all of the theorists. So I'd recommend going on that one, checking out what I've written about genre. Now, if you're right about genre, just going back to what I was saying about the examiner's report, don't forget, ultimately, as much as it's important to apply genre theorists, it's more important to talk about how you established genre, how you adhered to generic codes and conventions, how you challenged the genre, stuff like that. So actually, that's kind of what I would say at the moment is should be your priority. Yeah, Neil, Altman, stuff like that is all fine. Obviously, different centres will have done different theorists. We definitely did Altman with my guys. How do we go about applying theory on our own product? My teacher at TDA, I don't know what that is, said that we should use it in a way which we don't talk about how we use theories and rather how they apply. Is this right? Well, I guess you don't use a theory. You don't kind of go out there trying to. You don't go out there trying to intentionally use male gaze theory. So sorry, guys, trying to get this set up properly. So you don't go out there and say to yourself, "I want to use male gaze theory in this text." You can make a text and then say how male gaze theory applies, but that's just more about how you word it. Does that make sense? So let's think of an example. So with my guys, we've looked at Earp and Cats. Okay, so that's representation of masculinity. And in fairness, I know exactly what you're saying. I've read an awful lot of answers. You repeat yourself as if the theory was I've read an awful lot of answers where it's a simple case of. I've read a lot of answers where students will say, I used reception theory in this case. You don't use a theory, you apply it to your texts. Theories are based on ways of looking at and analysing your text. So I completely see where you're coming from there. But that's just wording. That's how you. That's really just a sentence that you can use. I struggle with time. Any tips on how to manage it? Aaron Cahill, that's a good question. So in terms of how you do time management, realistically, there's not enough time to kind of do each question justice. Now, I read something a couple years ago that said that statistically, people seem to do better if they answer question 2 first, the one where you should spend an hour on it, and then go question 1A, 1B. Now, the logic with this is that 50 marker, that's the big one. So that's really where you don't want to be kind of like running out of time. So if you start on question 2, that might be your best option to bag the most marks. Having said that, I did a mock with my guys during the half term, and yeah, I asked them all to try doing question 2 first, and it didn't necessarily go very well. So realistically, in a nutshell, what would I say about timings? Make sure you spend half an hour each on question 1A and 1B, and make sure you spend at least the full hour on question 2. That's where you're going to bag the most marks. That's the important thing. Do you repeat yourself if the theory is repeated throughout? Will Brooks, you'll have to ask a bit clearer. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Any tips on how you would structure your section B of the exam? It depends very, very much. Really, there's different structures for each of the theories. So I'm not necessarily sure that I'm not necessarily sure that I would say one set structure. That note that you could read behind me says too loud, apparently I'm shouting. That mock was horrible, David. I made it horrible so that no matter what comes next, will hopefully be, like, that was a worst case scenario. There's nothing worse than what you could see. Nice that your BTEC exam was good. He means if he has two parts of his production that could have the same theory applied to it, should you repeat yourself? Yeah, I think that makes sense. So the red flash, are you saying then that you could apply male gaze, for example, in numerous different respects? So it might be that you speak about your text in one sense where you have objectified women, and then in another sense where you haven't. Yeah, of course you could do that. Or perhaps if representation and the representation of women is like the major thing in your production, then yes, by all means you could do that. So yeah, as long as you show off confident knowledge of theoretical understandings, I think that would work. How would you write about creativity? So that one's from Jake Smithy. That's a good one. David Jones. Does it matter if we don't apply theory to question 1A? Question 1A doesn't really need theory at all. Question 1A is literally about showing your progression. It's more about your technical understanding. So yeah, don't worry about theory for question 1A. For question 1B, someone asked about creativity. I think I'm going to go to another slide quickly. So where are we? Creativity. Here's a list of things you could talk about for creativity. A is far less about theory, and it's more about you actually picking specific examples from your own work. That's what's going to get you the marks. If you can be super specific. So let me give you an example, okay? Let's say we're talking about a question 1A, which is about creativity. A very low mark would say, last year I was not very creative in terms of my my editing. I did lots of basic editing. Whereas this year I was far more creative with my editing because it was a lot more professional. That's not specific. That is a super low marker. So when I keep saying to my students, you have got to be specific, what I'm trying to say is this. specifically, how were you more creative in your edit? Well, I actually tried to use jump cuts throughout mine to establish a sense of urgency and pace. Be more specific. When did you use this? So, for example, in the scene where my character has just taken drugs and he's becoming paranoid, I used jump cuts to create a sense of panic and paranoia almost. There, you are being specific about how you're creative in editing, and you've given me a specific example of where you've done this. So that would be a very high scorer. Do you see what I mean? But you don't need to apply theory for that. Okay, let's scroll down. I've missed out on so many questions, guys. I'm sorry about this. Yeah, David, that's a really good shout out there to. That's a really good shout to Sean. Think about all the theories we've used, and really it's a case of you being confident with your media knowledge to apply them wherever. So, I mean, we teach Claude Levi-Strauss, binary opposites. We teach that primarily as a theorist for narrative, but when you think about it, you could apply binary opposites to representation. Maybe your hero and your villain are binary opposites, and you wanted to represent them as, you know, the villain in dressed in black and the hero dressed in white. That's binary opposites in representation. So don't be afraid to use other theorists from other areas. If you feel confident about applying them, I mean, that's the ultimate, isn't it? That's what we want for you guys. Jake, yes, the exam's tomorrow. Good luck with that. Is Attack the Block okay for a contemporary film case study for section B? So that one's from Brianna. I think what the specification says is the film must be within the last 5 years to be considered contemporary. I'm not sure when Attack the Block was made. That was like 2009 maybe? Either way, I mean, listen, at this late stage, you can't really change any of your case studies, so go with it. I'm sure it'll be absolutely fine. I don't mean to scare you there, but for contemporary texts, they do usually like them to be within the last 5 years. Luke, are you on the wrong video? This is for OCR Media Studies, which is tomorrow. Okay. Alexander, when I just said about using colour as binary opposites, it's a cliche. I completely agree. Binary opposites is more a case of binary opposites could be a case of like good versus evil, man versus machine. It can be anything. It's any kind of opposites. The colour one is always like it's a go-to. It's a cliche. But yeah, it doesn't mean you can't use it. Let me think. Dom, just try and get as much detail in media language as possible. Yep, very good shout. Huggins, nice to see you, I guess. Never been called a Ginger Jesus before. Thanks, Ollie. What do I think question 1B is going to be? What do I think question 1B is? I really don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's representation. I'd love it if it was representation. I mean, it could be... I don't really want to speculate, because for those of you who know anyone who's just done the AS exam, they did gender for question 1 in the AS exam again. I don't really want to speculate, because now that they've shown they can do that to try and trip us up, I don't want to speculate about it too much. So, I mean, last year was media language. Might be media language, who knows? Where are we? Sorry, guys, I'm just trying to catch up with some of your messages. You're praying it's not genre. Genre's not a bad one, honestly. Again, watch the video after this live stream. Watch the video I did earlier today about genre theorists, but also just think about how your text adheres to the generic codes and conventions of the genre. So, I mean, I always use the kind of example of a sci-fi. So, how have you adhered to those generic conventions in terms of having, you know, spaceships and aliens, or you know, a generic storyline, stuff like that? And how have you tried to challenge them? I think I might have another slide on genre, actually, guys. Let me just see if I can find one. On genre for you, I'm afraid. Sorry. Isabel Peacock. What could the question... Right, so that was a question from Jake Smithy. What are the options for 1B? They are media language, genre, representation, audience. another one. Narrative. So those are one of the 5 options. So that's what that is. I just saw a really good question from someone. I'm going to say that one again. When discussing past events in question 2, how long in the past do they have to be? Like contemporary has to be more than 5 years. What do the past pieces require? So that's for Alex. There's not a set time on historical ones because it depends on which media area you've studied. So if you're doing media regulation or something like that, you might be looking at kind of texts which were regulated maybe back in the 60s. I'm doing video games with my guys, so naturally my historic ones come from the 90s. That's just because the history of games is not as far-reaching as movies. Newspapers, they may go way back. My historic example is actually a very recent one. So we spoke about how the Independent closed in 2016. I'm choosing that as a past example because it's no longer in print. Does that make sense? I hope that answers your question. Okay, Oscar, can you explain media language? Media language is absolutely anything that you do that creates meaning. Okay, so the way I put it to my students is media language, you derive meaning from the English language. The way I'm speaking to you now, it's how you understand and how you create meaning. How do you create meaning on the front page of a magazine? That would be colour, typography, layout, imagery. Those different elements create meaning for us. Last year, for your AS exam, when you looked at a TV show and you analysed the camera work, the editing, the sound, and the mise en scene, all of those things create meaning. So think about how you know a bad guy is a bad guy. Stereotypically, or rather cliche, they might be wearing black and they might have very dramatic music. The dramatic music communicates to us. It symbolises danger, stuff like that. So media language is literally how you create meaning through the medium that you used. Okay? Let me have a look. Yeah, guys, I can see a lot of people in the chat kind of comparing theorists. I don't want anyone panicking if it's like, oh gosh, I don't know that theorist, or I've not done that theorist. The media is a huge area. It's very, very likely that there will be people from each centre who will be doing very specific theorists based on their topic. So like I say, I'll be seeing the likes of Earp and Katz and Andy Reid. That's going to make sense to my guys, but certainly not to other people. You know, there are some of them which are staples, and everyone will know Laura Mulvey, and everyone will know Todorov. But actually, beyond that, there are so many hundreds of theorists that you can apply. Don't worry so much if there's ones that you don't know. Are creativity questions always in conjunction with another aspect? That's a great question, Sam. I've seen an awful lot of them where it is, like you say, discuss some of your most creative decisions in terms of research and planning. However, I think, my mind's going back now, I think there has been one in the past where it is straight up creativity. So no, I don't think it has to be in conjunction with another one. So there's your answer. Someone's got conjunctivitis. Okay. For section B, is it generally the same question that can be asked? So that one's from Harry. The thing with question or section B, the thing with section B is that all OCR give you is a topic. Now that might have been media regulation. For my guys, I chose media in the digital age, and because from there you can interpret it in any way you want. So I could have done video games in the digital age, newspapers in the digital age, movies in the digital age, radio in the digital age. Because you can interpret that topic in so many hundreds of ways, they do tend to keep the questions very, very broad. Okay, so no, the questions are never exactly the same. However, they do tend to be very, very open questions. Stuff like, so for media in the digital age, to what extent has the internet had an impact on audiences and producers? Has the introduction of the digital technologies been mostly positive or negative for media producers? You know, you could answer that question one of a million ways depending on what you studied, and that's exactly why they ask such broad questions. Okay, again, I've got to try and catch up on stuff. So that's interesting. I'm kind of picking up on a conversation here between Dom and Brina. So you had a female as your main character. So is this challenging the patriarchy suggested in Mulvey's theory? I mean, it's more to do with how you have filmed your female main character. Mulvey acknowledged, I think, that you can have a female lead. You can have like a female character who's in the film an awful lot. They've got a lot of screen time, but it's really more about how the camera looks at that female character, kind of like needlessly lingering on the curves of the body, having them wearing certain things, how other characters interact with that character. That's more about male gaze theory. Okay, so just because you've got a female lead, and I'm thinking back to a text I put in my male gaze video. You might want to check it out. It was a '60s film where, yeah, there was a female lead, but she was, for the most of the time, she was literally running around in kind of like a bikini. So yeah, it's not just about screen time, it's about how they are represented and how the camera looks at them. Does that make sense? Okay, let me try and catch up. I've missed quite a few comments, I'm afraid. What do you think the question will be for section B? I'm afraid I've got no idea, but it'll be pretty open. And don't forget, you get 2 options for section B. So find your section, and hopefully one of them should be quite nice. Sometimes what they do in the past is they will give you a very specific question. So suggest what the digital age has done for media audiences in the past 3 years within this part. You know, it can be very specific. And then they'll give you another one which is very, very wide open. So I mean, that kind of varies. That's a great question, Ellie. If you can't link theories to your work, do you mention that they don't link, or do you just not mention to it at all? It actually says, in this teacher's specification, it actually says candidates are just as free to talk about how a theorist does not apply to their work as it does. So in other words, perhaps you've got a female character in your text, but she's a background character, and you certainly don't objectify her. You can still show off your understanding and your knowledge of male gaze theory by saying how you have not adhered to it. It might have been a conscious decision that you did not want to objectify her in any way, shape or form. But if you can throw in some of those words like scopophilia and show off your understanding of male gaze theory, then you're bound to do far, far better. Okay? I'm sorry guys, I've got to try and catch up with some of these. Lauren, doesn't apply to you, can still say that. Yep, thanks. That's what I just said, Lauren. You're right. Absolutely spot on. Nice one. No, questions really vary. See, guys, check you out. Lauren and Dom, you're like my teaching assistants. You can like field the questions that I don't answer, if that's all right with you. How many examples for each in question 1A? That's from Ellie King. I've been saying to my guys, aim for 3. I've found in the past that you can waffle a bit if you aim for 2, and I found that if you go for 4 examples, then they tend to be lacking in enough detail. So, I mean, yeah, Josh, nice one, you're here too. Yeah, I would aim for 3. If you're a really fast writer, go for the 4. I've got a lot of students who are quite slow, so... Oh, and you, Sean, sorry guys, I'm not leaving you out, honestly. Thank you for helping out, honestly. Any more questions, guys? Because I've got a few more slides, if there aren't, just about what the examiner said. In fact, I'll tell you what, while you're trying to think of something, or while you've got any more questions, I'll show you what the examiner said about question 1A, just to answer Jack O'Brien's question there. 3 examples of how you have developed over the past 2 years. So in question 1A, let's say it was creativity. Give me 3 examples of where you were and where you are now and how you've developed. Does that make sense? Anyway, so let's look at what the examiner said about question 1A. So people, I think, kind of say, last year I did this and it was really rubbish. This year I did this, and it was really, really good. They want to see you evaluate, well, you don't think last year was as good? Why wasn't it as good? Try and evaluate what could you have done better, because it's not just a case of saying I'm so much better now because I can do this, this, and this, and this. It takes genuine understanding and skill to look back at something and critique it and say this was flawed because. So I mean, try and spend as much time on each. And the other thing I've been saying to my students an awful lot is it's not about beating up what you did last year. You might be really proud of what you did last year and you can justify it. However, you're more proud you've done something better. You've developed it. You've progressed even more this year. So you don't have to say just for the hell of it, like all of my camera angles were rubbish last year, whereas this year they were amazing and varied and stuff like that. It might be that they were just very cliched last year, or very conventional. This time you tried to break a convention. Think about it like that. Oh, does it not record your mic when you're recording? Right, Sean, thank you. I didn't know that at all. That's really handy. That's really helpful. Thank you very much, Dom. Okay, Sean, Dom, thank you. I won't do that again, I promise. I basically just read it. Hopefully you read it as well. I won't do that again. Okay, so Ellie Vernon, you're in a bit of a sticky situation, same as Lauren, if you're still there. Oh, hi, Lauren. You're in a bit of a sticky situation because you're comparing, I imagine, a print text to a film text. Now, I find that's usually quite difficult because, for example, if you're trying to compare, you're saying your use of typography or camera angles are far better. It's quite difficult when you're doing that across different formats. So really, you want to try and pick skills which are, constant. So you had to take photos for your magazine. Hopefully you had to do a lot of shooting for your movie. Does that make sense? So there's something. Dave, I'm giving you a shout out every time I see you. Dave. Hi, Dave. Okay. Right. Charlie, I hadn't seen you yet. Hi, Charlie. Let me just try and get some more questions. Post-production is anything that is done after you have taken shots or photos, so pretty much editing. Now, that's a great shout, Lauren, because I want to talk about this a little bit. If you are doing a film, it's very obvious what post-production is. Post-production for film is the editing, the assembly of footage. It might be colouring your footage, adjusting the sound, using special effects. It's kind of obvious what post-production is for film. For print text, it's far more difficult because really you make your magazine and then it's done. But actually post-production would include choosing your layout, image manipulation for your photographs, making any tweaks. Really, I would argue anything that goes beyond writing your article, taking your photos, anything after that, really, you could call post-production. Assembling it in Photoshop or Illustrator or whatever it is you've used, that is really, I'd say that's post-production. Mimi, bruh, yes, you can have a shout out. Yeah, and you, Izzy. For 1A and 1B, how much should we aim to write? 3 to 4 points with examples with each. Yeah, Frank, that's about what I'd go for. At the end of the day, that big old question you always get asked, how much should I write? The simple answer is as much as you can in half an hour. In my experience, to do each point justice, that usually equates to about 3 points for question 1A. Okay, so that's what you should be aiming for. David, no, they will not combine in question 1B. Don't worry, that would be too much. Like you wouldn't know where to start there. So the one thing I can guarantee you for question 1B is the questions aren't that scary. Realistically, it's always going to be analyze your text in relation to genre, representation, audience, and so on. Lauren, what's this from you? I have done a magazine for my production. I have found that thinking about how I have used Photoshop and how your editing has come along, this is where I found the most of my points. Yeah, great shout, Lauren. For anyone out there who's doing, who's comparing like magazine to film, talk about, like Lauren said, talk about your use of Photoshop. And don't forget, they've said you don't have to talk about your main text. You might want to talk about your ancillaries. You might want to talk about work you've done outside of school. Realistically, what they're looking for in question 1A is a sense that you have clearly learned technical ability and skill and you are confident at using media language and technical terminology, and you can confidently justify what you've done, which is now better. Okay? Yeah, great shout, Lauren, for that one. Todorov. Josh, you flipping love Todorov, don't you? Ellie, you're saying help. I'm just going to look back. Collective identity. Okay, I'm not sure. So do you want to know what collective identity is? Um, Collective identity is one of the points that Henry Jenkins brought up as kind of like a byproduct of convergence culture. Um, so the idea now that you can, as a group online, where you can share with everybody. Oh, I think my stream's just frozen. Sorry guys, I think there's a problem. I don't know what it is. I'm just trying to reboot it. Can you see me now? It looks like it froze. Okay, is that working? I think you can see me now. Is that better? It was buffering for me, guys. Hopefully you can see me now. Right, I'm just trying to catch up on all of that stuff that I've just missed. Me and myself and Matt, any advice for question 2, we, media and democracy? I've not studied that, I'm afraid. And I tell you what, it's such a huge area of the media. I've not really looked at it at all, so I'm really sorry. I don't have anything I can give you on that. I did awful on my coursework last year and there was a decent amount of stuff missing. Can I lie about having done stuff in it? Ryan King, that's a really tough question because you're right. There's a very high chance that the examiner marking your paper will have never seen nor will ever see your coursework from last year. Having said that, I would argue you can kind of tell how legitimate someone's response is when you're reading it. What I'm going to say is this. I would be very careful when it comes to bending the truth. Okay? And that's about as diplomatic an answer as I can give, I'm afraid. I don't really know. Dom, good. I'm glad you're back. Sorry about that. I didn't know what was going on there, but certainly on my screen it froze. So I don't know if it froze for you as well. Can I give advice on narrative? That's from Raphael. Narrative. You want to talk about how you have constructed a narrative. So obviously this is going to work a lot. It's going to be far easier if you've done a moving image than if you've done a magazine. Now, I would argue maybe the easiest theorist to apply is Todorov, although he is kind of like a go-to. The fact that any kind of text that you could possibly look at will follow the basic idea of something has to go wrong, right? Well, Todorov argued that the 5 different parts of a narrative is, having order and then having a disruption. There would be no story without disruption. So if you can talk about that in relation to Todorov and then identify specifically in your text where the disruption was. So for example, you could outline Todorov's 5 areas and then you could actually try and pick what they are. So at the start of my text, when just using Josh's text as an example, at the start, when my character's getting up and going to school, everything seems normal. We get an idea of the equilibrium. This is a student. When the door locks, there is clearly a disruption, and they don't realize it at first, but once they go over and check the door and they realize they've been locked in the room, there is realization of the problem, and realistically the rest of the story is now trying to find a solution to the problem. Now, if you can give specific examples there as to how that hooks the audience, then you're doing fine. The other one that you can look at in terms of the other one you can look at in terms of narrative, which is really easy, is Barthes. Okay, so Barthes spoke about enigma codes and action codes. That I find is just the easiest theorist to talk about in terms of what you did and why and how that enabled narrative. Okay, I'm sorry to kind of go on there. I'm going to catch up. Lauren, you just said Rosie has something else. Dave, have I frozen for you? Okay, Ollie, I've already gone over creativity. I'll go over it again in a second. Big Aaron, bit harsh, but what I would actually say to Sam is if you are struggling with your theorists, on the top, what would it be, up there? The top right of this video, there's a little eye icon, and if you click on that, I put up a video this afternoon that kind of very, very briefly outlines any theorists that you could want. Do you have a question? I'll go back. Okay, Sean, it was Earp and Katz, and they didn't say that conflict was the main. They didn't necessarily say that conflict was the main drive in narrative, but it is something that you basically found in all narratives. It was almost always the resolve to the problem. Something's gone wrong, let's fix the problem with aggression. And they argued that's had a very, very negative effect on audiences. So going back to what I said earlier about question 1B, 1B using different theorists for different areas, when you think about it like that, you could very easily apply Earp and Katz as much for representation as you could audience. Because if you've got aggression and hostilities in your text, you are then influencing any male members of your audience to be aggressive, and you're reinforcing this idea that to fix a problem, you need to be aggressive. Does that make sense? So don't be afraid to use theorists outside of the categories that they were taught to you in. Right, Dom. Hi, sir. How would you structure a section B question about theory? Which theories of online media are most convincing to you? Why? Yeah, great question. Okay, for this one, I'm going to... Rosie, I'm glad that's two of you who won that question. So for that one, I'm going to go back to a different slide, and I'm going to make sure I've got the right sound on it this time, because I don't want to. I don't want you to not be able to hear me. Okay, so for my guys, this slide should look familiar to you. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see it in this tiny, tiny chat, but what we've got here is our argument, okay? So think about who... David, right, David, your answer Rosie's question. Rosie, isn't your question about how to answer one about media theories in question B? David, am I answering the right question? You seem really angry the way that you're writing in capital letters. I feel like I've upset you somewhat. Okay, I'm just going to quickly kick PhotoLab. Think about what is the backbone to most of our arguments. Now, I would say Henry Jenkins. Henry Jenkins applies throughout all of what we've done for participatory culture, for the news, and for creating games online. Okay, so really, you'd be writing all of the same stuff. You'd be writing all of the things that you'd be writing all of the things that you'd write in any question. It's really a case of how you steer it towards the answer. So I'd probably take the approach of, I think Henry Jenkins' work on convergence culture is the most significant contribution to media theory in the area of the digital age. This is because his work on participatory culture and the way that technologies have converged completely relate to how video games and the news is completely transforming. Each of these industries is completely changing. And from there, you're really free to talk about how, well, once upon a time, games were made like this. Now, because of the convergence culture, they've been completely changed. Once upon a time, all of our news came from newspapers. Now, because of convergence culture, because of what Henry Jenkins was talking about, people are flocking online to get their news because it's more convenient. Take a look at the Twitter example of the Hudson River. So you see, guys, you're still writing exactly the same stuff, but it's a simple case of how do you link it to your answer. Someone's just said it's frozen. Ellie King, can you just verify whether or not it's frozen? I'm hoping you can still hear me. Just checking, guys. Can someone just type if you can? Yeah, it's frozen. Has it? Ellie and Cats. So, I mean, I can see myself. I think it might just be frozen for you, Ellie. And Frank, I can see it. I can see myself up here. Can anyone see? Can you confirm that I'm still live? Anyway, yeah, we're back. We're good. I have no idea who that person is you just said, Big Aaron. No idea. But like I said, there are so many theorists. It's probably someone you've studied that I haven't. Yeah. Web 3.0, that is realistically, in question 2, you are expected to talk about media industries, that you are confident enough to make a comment on where things are going. So with my guys, in the example of video games, we looked at Web 3.0 and the idea that that means kind of integrated technology, integrated information. you know what I mean? So the idea that now you have wearable technology, stuff like that. The fact that now all media online allows for exchange and participation. We could argue for video games that soon, one day, perhaps all games will be funded online. Perhaps all print newspapers will die out. It's all speculation and it's all opinion based. So don't worry, it's up to you what you say. But you need to have an opinion, and you could argue to have an opinion, you need to know what you're talking about. So that's why you might want to talk about Web 3.0. Okay, I'm going to go back because I missed a lot of questions. Yeah, I'm really sorry, guys. I can see people saying it's frozen. Sean, it's fine for me as well. I can see it. Blumner and Katz, Brandon, what about them? Or are you answering someone's question? I'm not sure. Yeah, all good for you, Ryan. That's a relief. Yeah, you said it exactly right, Josh. It's the idea of always being connected. So anyway, Tim O'Reilly came up with the phrase Web 2.0 because he realized that around about the turn of the century, the internet had changed, and no longer was it a case of just going to a page where you could access information online. It became something where you could interact with it, and it was almost a two-way street. There was an exchange. So he was like the new age of the internet, thanks to HTML5 and XML, stuff like that. There's a new age of the internet where we can watch movies, we can contribute, we can upload stuff, we can add pictures. So he really did kind of notice that change. Web 3.0 is the term which is being given to that next step. And the next step is very much a case of, well, you no longer have to access a device to be connected to the internet. It might be that your phone pings to say that you've just gotten an email, or it might be that you download something straight to your phone without having to go through like a proxy. So really, it's a case of where do you think the technologies you've studied are going to be in the next 5 years? For anyone who studied the likes of Netflix, do you think cinemas are going to exist in 20 years, or do you think everything's just going to be downloaded? I don't know. How do we throw Web 3.0 in the end somewhere? Yes, yes, Sean. If I was you, once you've made your argument about where things were, once you've talked about the dawn of the internet and Sir Tim Berners-Lee, and you've talked about Tim O'Reilly and all that stuff, and you've said about where games are now, and like you can see how the internet changed things. Now games are being funded, distributed, everything online, marketing's being done online. Take a look at Goat Simulator. At the end of that, I would probably wrap up with a nice little paragraph saying, where does this leave us in the future? I wouldn't be surprised with Web 3.0 if things are all going to be done online. There will shops like GameStop are going to continue to close. You might remember, we looked at that, the closure of GameStation, because they just can't keep up with digital sales. You know, and you've got the evidence there. 55% of people who bought Fallout 4 bought it online. So you have got evidence that you can categorically say, I think in the future all games will be downloaded. Likewise for the news, you can say about how I think print is going to end. All news will be on social media primarily, and it will almost be like they link to different satellites, different areas of kind of like read more about it on other places. But actually, your homepage, the front page of a newspaper will be Twitter, Facebook, stuff like that. That's a good question, Tricia. Can you compare theorists? Yeah, I mean, I guess if they work well with each other. Otherwise, sometimes theorists' work is so separate to each other, it doesn't really apply anyway. But let me give you an example. I said about this earlier, but narrative. If we talk about Barthes and his action codes, that actually works hand in hand with Todorov. So an action code, as far as Barthes says, is a visual action, a visual cue that something in the narrative is about to happen. So it might be that moment in a detective movie when they do that kind of look, which is like, I've just had a brainstorm moment. I think I've just worked out who the killer is. You know, in that sense, you could certainly link Barthes and Todorov because that action is instigating that there's realization, or perhaps it's the start of the repair, you know? So, I mean, yeah, you can compare them if they are comparable, but some of them aren't, I would say. So, I'm sorry, that's not really much of an answer. Yes, if it applies, no, if it doesn't. Right, great question, Ben Morgan. Any advice what we could talk about on talking about conventions of real texts? I've got a handy um, slide for that one, and I'd like to show it to you. Okay, so these are ideas I had for what you could talk about for the conventions of real texts. Okay. Uh, yeah, just to say about. Sorry, I'm just reading someone's comment. KNBS Media. Yeah, it's not Bulmers and cats. Definitely don't say Bulmers and cats, please. Don't say Bulmers and cats. It's Blumler. But if you can just use that, if you just need to remember like a visual code, a visual, kind of like a cue, yeah, it's Blumler, not Bulmer, okay? So, conventions, ideas. What could you write about when you're talking about the conventions of real texts? Now, don't forget, it might be that you want to write about how you used the conventions of real texts. That's great. You might want to say, like, conventionally, a soap opera will have these characters, a conventional narrative will be this, and you adhered to it. That's absolutely great. Talk about that. However, you're just as free to talk about how you challenged these conventions. So you wanted to make a sci-fi that wasn't just run-of-the-mill, completely, conventional. So you're just as free to talk about that. So here's what I've got on my list, guys. What conventions are odds and save the day? What is a conventional storyline for a romance? Boy and girl meet. They are absolutely madly in love. One of them finds out something bad about the other, and they break up. But then they realize it was all a big mistake, and they get back together again. So these are conventional. I think I might have frozen again. These are conventional storylines, and that is something that you might have used, it's something you might have challenged. I'm just going to restart. I'm going to restart the stream, guys, because I think I might have frozen again. Okay, hopefully we should be good there. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the conventions, guys. Yeah, conventions, you might want to talk about a conventional storyline. You might want to talk about a conventional character type. Who is the conventional hero of a sci-fi? Who's the conventional hero of a horror film? Stuff like that. What else have we got? Conventional camera work. If you look at the new Star Trek films, there are conventions that you will always see in this kind of sci-fi. Have you adhered to them? Have you challenged them? Have you developed them? Conventional mise-en-scene sounds. So for who it was who had that question, these are the kind of conventions that you might be talking about how you've used them, how you've developed them, or how you've challenged them. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Let's go back to me. Yeah, sorry, Josh. I don't know what's going on with this buffering. I've got no idea, but that's a bit annoying. Trisha, kind of what you said, both of those are kind of inaccurate. It's not about what the audience does for the media, and it's not about what the media does for the audience. It's about why. It's looking for justification, literally gratification. What do people get out of the media? So, really it's a two-way street. The media exists for the audience, and the audience will always access the media. But why do you access it? What do you get out of it? So really, that's where those four things come in. You either access it because you want information, social interaction, personal identity, or entertainment. So it's really a case of justifying why have people watched your texts. So if you get audience in question 1B, you would be insane to not write a little bit about Blumler and cats, because it's so easy to just say people would be gratified by my text because it's entertaining. That's really simple. Hopefully it's back. I'm sorry, guys, for those of you who've frozen. Rosie, do we need introduction and conclusions for question 1A and 1B, or is it better to spread more time on the actual answer? Great question, Rosie. I think it would be a good idea to do a very... Oh, it's frozen again. I'm going to keep talking just in case it's just buffering for me. It might be that other people are... yeah, so Rosie, I don't know if you can hear me, but don't waste too much time writing a conclusion, or don't write too much time writing a long introduction. If I was you, introduce your point basically, and then spend more time actually giving points. Okay? Okay, guys, I'm streaming. It looks like it's frozen for me. I don't even know if anyone can see this, guys, but that might... You know what? It's near enough 9 o'clock now, guys. I'm going to have to wrap it up there. My feed looks like it's frozen, so I don't really know... Oh, no, I'm back. Hopefully you guys can see this. Mine froze for quite a long time there. What I was just saying, Rosie, I don't know if you heard any of it, was don't spend too much time on a conclusion for 1A and 1B. Give yourself a nice little introduction and then just get straight in there with your points. That's where you're going to make up more of your marks, okay? I'm afraid, sorry Andrew, I've not really done much on moral panic and regulation. I'm teaching that next year, but I've not actually done it this year, so I can't really answer that question for you. Guys, it's been nearly an hour now. I think I'm going to call it there. What I would recommend, if you're going to be up revising all night, what my recommendation would be is to perhaps watch the video I posted earlier based on the theorists. That might be a good idea. I think it would also be a really good idea to take a look at some of the past questions. You can find them on the OCR website. And for my guys, if you go onto Google Classroom, if you've not done already, and I know there was a little bit of flack about this earlier, just questioning how much it actually does help, take a look at a level 4 response. Honestly, it's on Google Classroom, and just try and identify what have they done. It's saying there that this is a level 4 answer. Why is it a level 4 answer? So that's really the best thing I could do. Good, I'm glad you heard, Rosie. Right, guys, I'm going to call it there. For my guys, I will be in my classroom from about 8:20 tomorrow, so hopefully we'll have time to kind of go through any last minute questions, go through any last minute theorists, whatever you want to talk about, settle any nerves. But I'd really recommend now, guys, try and get an early night and have breakfast in the morning. Those are my two important tips for the exam tomorrow, guys. Okay, so I'm going to call off there, and very good luck. Try not to spend too late, don't stay up too late cramming, Dom. That would be a bad idea. Okay, right, see you later.